Everyone, and welcome to the second panel discussion of Cactus's webinar series on academic mental health. My name is Andrea, and we're having a bit of technical difficulty, so you can't see me, but this is my picture right here. And we're joined by a lovely panel today. Guys, if you could just give them a little wave, that's great. Right. So today's we're here for a very important topic today. The topic for today is PhD mental health, and I'll tell you a little bit about myself and Cactus, the organization that I work for, before we let our panel discuss this topic. Great. So, like I said, my name is Andrea. I am Senior Editor, Global Community Engagement at Cactus. And for those of you who've heard of the Cactus Mental Health Survey, it is something that I have been managing for the past 1 year. This is my Twitter handle down here, and feel free to tweet at me whenever. I'm mostly on Twitter most of the time. All right, a little bit about Cactus. So Cactus is a global scholarly communications company, and we've been around for about 17 years. We have a global presence in multiple cities across the globe. And over the years, we've been working with researchers to help them navigate the publication process. We have been helping them with things like post-publication, research communication, and just navigating their publication and academic journeys. About a year ago, we launched what is now called the Cactus Mental Health Survey. And for those of you who don't know about the Cactus Mental Health Survey yet, it is a global survey that specifically deals with mental health, fulfillment, and well-being in academia. And our reason for this was specifically to get researchers' perspective on what some of the joy and stress triggers are in their lives, and what, in their opinion, would be a more positive, more nurturing research culture. And we ran it for about 9 months. And despite the unexpected COVID-19 pandemic, we were very amazed by the brilliant response that the researcher community gave us, with over 13,000 researchers participating globally. And this is, in fact, the largest and the most diverse survey of its kind, because the sample is very diverse and representative. It covers all academic career stages, and it even has strong representation of minorities. We received responses from 169 countries, and we also received a lot of open comments, free text comments from researchers on the kind of changes they would like to see in the global research culture. But we know that just collecting data and putting out a report, it's a great milestone for us, but we know that in order to take the conversation forward, there's a lot more that we could do. And we need to encourage people to talk about this more. And for that purpose, I introduce Our Voice. It is a community platform which encourages discussions on mental health, and it welcomes your experiences with mental health. And it's something that my team and I have worked on. It's a small team of 3, and we've worked on this ourselves. We've created it recently, and I would love for all of you to join. You can have open discussions with a community of researchers who care about mental health as strongly as each of us do here. And you can get and give advice and support from a caring and growing community of researchers. And so ideally, what we want to do with this is we want to further the conversation on mental health in academia in a safe space where people feel comfortable enough to. So I would really encourage each of you to join the Our Voice platform, and I hope to see you there, because I spend a lot of time there personally. All right, so we have, like I said, a lovely panel with us here today. And before I start, I'm just going to put out a button to the Cactus Mental Health Survey report, which we've recently released. It compiles the results of the 13,000 researchers who participated, and it's a great read. It's very comprehensive, and I would encourage each of you to download the report. It's a little button here, and it's going to be there throughout, so you can even do it towards the end. All right, we can start. Zoe, over to you.
By thanking Cactus for inviting us to be here and hosting this webinar today. I think PhD mental health is something that doesn't get talked about as often as it should be. And it's only really by talking about PhD mental health that we can actually start to break the stigma around mental health and work towards positive change in our research culture. And so I'm Zoe Ayres. I'm a research scientist. I work in the water industry, and I'm also a mental health advocate. So some of my work involves creating posters for awareness through academia. So I've created posters from undergraduate level all the way through to professorial level to talk about some of the mental health stresses that exist in those positions. I have run several campaigns. So that includes the 100 Voices campaign, where 100 researchers came forward and talked openly about their mental health, 2 of which are on the panel today. And also I'm the co-founder of Voices of Academia with Marissa Edwards, and we actually have this blog where we invite people to talk a little bit about their mental health within academia. So really trying to break the stigma around mental health within academic departments, and with a focus on PhD mental health. And I'm super excited today to be joined by the amazing panelists here who I know personally, actually, and they all do amazing work. And so without further ado, I'd like to just ask each one of them to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about their research and also why they care about academic mental health. So if I could start with Juanita, please, could you just give us a brief introduction?
Sure. Thank you so much, Zoe. My name is Juanita Limas, and I'm a PhD candidate at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And I currently study the cell cycle. So I study DNA replication, and specifically how DNA replication takes place in normal cells versus in cancer cells, and more specifically the G1 to S transition. I have sort of been kind of a late bloomer to this, but I kind of got into mental health because of a series of unfortunate events that have happened for people that I've personally known that have taken their life due to suicide. And so one of the things that I started was I'm a Howard Hughes Medical Institute Gilliam Fellow. And one of our Gilliam Fellows in our cohort took her life last December. So I decided to write a letter to HHMI to start talking about some of these issues. And I got 87 other Gilliam Fellows worldwide to write a letter, sort of a call to action. And from that has stemmed a whole series of initiatives that I've started. So I'm the co-founder of the TAY Consortium, that it's a group of Gilliam Fellows that we are inviting other people worldwide to talk about mental health within STEM PhD researchers. I've also started a task force within my department in pharmacology at UNC, and they've been incredibly receptive to that. So with that, like I said, I've kind of come into this a little bit late in the game, but I really feel like that we need to start having these conversations. So anyway, without further ado, I'll go ahead and pass it back. Thank you.
I say thank you for that, and thank you for the work that you're doing. Bhavik, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Bhavik Patel. I'm a professor of clinical and bioanalytical chemistry here in the UK. So essentially, really, my research is involved around analytical chemistry, mainly on electrochemistry and the development of tools and resources to measure biological processes. But the other core area that's really interesting to me, that is a real core area of my research, is focused around pedagogy and educational practices that evolve around improvement in skills, particularly towards employability at postgraduate and undergraduate level. With regards to this particular event, mental health is something obviously I've personally experienced throughout all the transitions of my career in academia, and have been quite vocal about expressing those. Certainly in my position of privilege as a professor, it's seldom that we talk about these issues. And so my voice, I feel, is very important to project in this space. Additionally, as someone who comes from an ethnic background, these factors are seldom explored in the transactions between mental health and different protected stereotypes. So it's really those areas that I focus on particularly in order to make sure that I can project my voice to support those that are in need.
Thank you, Bhavik. It's a really worthwhile thing you're doing. So Linda, if you could introduce yourself now, please.
Hi, I'm Linda. I am a food science student. I'm a Teagasc Walsh Scholar at University College Cork in Ireland, and my research focuses on sensory science and looking at how our liking and our perception changes during the eating process. I guess I've kind of always been a silent mental health advocate because trying to support everyone because I've struggled with mental health for a lot of my life. But I guess I got more vocal as I transitioned into grad school because I saw, well, I guess firstly, my own mental health was affected a bit to adapt and try and deal with the situation, but also seeing everyone around me struggle as well. It kind of was something that I wanted to help change. So I started working with PhD Balance and Dragonfly Mental Health with around that.
Thank you very much. I'm super excited by the wealth of experience that we all have. So I think this is going to be a really valuable discussion today. So like for the remainder of this webinar, we're going to go through a series of questions really based on the CACTUS Mental Health Report to kind of highlight some of that report, but also have some of these conversations that I think we don't necessarily hear people speak about. So to start with, just to kind of warm up the audience, I guess. So we want to just have a conversation a little bit about work hours and how many work hours you typically work in a week. So on the right hand side of your screen, you'll find that there's a panel that contains a poll in there. And so if you could answer that poll, that would be really useful for us. We're really interested to see what your work hours look like. This poll is anonymous, so don't panic about that. Throughout the course of this, we're going to be asking a series of polls, and it is anonymous. Okay. In the CACTUS Mental Health Report, 31% of researchers surveyed typically reported working more than 50 hours a week, which is actually more than contracted, right? So I guess what I would like to ask is, do you think there's a link between work hours and mental health? And I want to start with you, please, Linda.
Yes, I definitely think there is a link between work hours and mental health. And even though it's something I advocate for a lot, it is still something I struggle with, making sure that I remember to take breaks and not work in the evening. It is definitely something that is kind of like we all need our breaks. When we talk about academia, we talk a lot about using, our brain. So it's kind of a lot of the work is done with brain power, and it is absolutely exhausting. It takes a lot out of you. And you need to make sure that you take your breaks, you have hobbies, you take your evenings off, you take your weekends off, because you need that downtime to properly work and to also just feel like you're okay. Because one thing we also see along with a lot of workouts is high amounts of burnout and people leaving academia because they just can't deal with this lifestyle anymore.
Yeah. I agree. And I think that, like, for me, I'm much more creative after I've taken a break. And I think we often have this kind of, like, if we're really, really working at it because we really want to succeed, like, often we can feel like we can't take a break. And sometimes we kind of have to change that viewpoint and realize that investing in ourselves and investing in taking time out to look after ourselves is actually investing in our work too. And I think sometimes that connection gets missed. Juanita, how about you with work hours? What are your thoughts on it?
Oh, I'm incredibly guilty of that. I mean, I say that this, but I will tell you, I'm not going to lie. I'm incredibly guilty of coming home and I continue to work. Especially now, I'm trying to finish up my PhD, and so I feel sort of a sense of urgency. And then not only that, but then when I don't work or if I take a break, then I feel incredibly guilty. And then all those feelings start setting in, and it's this constant battle that I have with myself that I have to, and not only that, but for me also, you know, since I was little, I, both my parents are Mexican, so I grew up as a Mexican American in the U.S. And from day one, I've been conditioned, you have to work 10 times harder than everybody else to sort of get the street cred that everybody else gets. And so this is sort of, for me, I feel like it's ingrained in sort of my DNA, to just keep working, work. And so it's really, really hard to sort of turn that off. But it's important because like I said, like Linda was saying as well, that it really affects everything that you do. So yeah, I'm guilty of it. So.
Do you have any tips for how you might manage that guilt in terms of feeling guilty when you're taking time out?
Yeah, I actually talked to my therapist about this. So because I was like, how do I get over this? And so she had recommended a few things. So she was saying things like, well, for example, try to remember the fact that you're in a PhD because people know that you have talent. People believe in you, that there is a committee of people that actually feel like that you are, you're worthy. And that I oftentimes forget about because I feel like, things don't work in the lab and I'm always having failures. And so I always feel like, oh, I'm horrible at everything. Like, no, actually you got in because of who you are, because you're really, really good. So treat yourself. So I have to really constantly think about things that make me feel good. Like I've been trying to do some more reading, not reading for science. I'm trying to read books that I really like. And so I got a Kindle for my birthday, my fiance. And so that was really fun. And so I said, I want you to just get me some books that are non-science.
So I guess like rebuilding like on hobbies and actually finding something else to do in the time.
Something other than science. So yeah.
And Bhavik, coming around to you in terms of work hours and mental health, like particularly like as a professor and through from your PhD, like what are your thoughts on how we can kind of protect PhD students' mental health with work hours and not kind of push work hours onto our students too heavily? Bhavik, I don't know if you're on mute or we'll move on to the next slide. One moment. I guess this kind of comes down to like setting boundaries as PhD researchers. Like how do we set boundaries with work hours, particularly if like our supervisors, for example, are asking us to work those hours? Like how do we go about setting boundaries? 38% of the respondents to the CACTUS survey said they were overwhelmed by their work situation quite often, and so like if we're feeling overwhelmed, we should be able to take time out to actually manage that. So how do we actually go about setting boundaries for these work hours? Bhavik, I'm going to come around to you again and see if your sound is now working, and if not, we'll move on to one of the other panelists.
Yeah, so I think, definitely there is a relationship between work hours, from a supervisory's point of view, looking downwards now. From my point of view, you know when you're overworking, I guess. This is the key aspect to it. There's an assumption that by working more, it's productive, it's going to benefit. But actually, what you tend to notice is from a supervisory's point of view, that actually by doing that additional work, you'll actually not providing as much quality in the work you're doing. You're rushing through things because you're trying to get as many things done and it's because your mind can't cope with the amount of stress and energy you're putting towards it. So I always find that I tend students to say, well look what's going on. This is not because you're not working hard, you're not diligent, it's because you need a break. You definitely need a break. You need a mental break to get away from it. And I know when I was doing my PhD, my supervisor pulled me to one side and said, do something that the brain needs to do that's not science. Go and play chess, go and swim in the sea, do something that's completely different, take your mind away from it and refresh your brain. Because once it's refreshed, there'll be a whole degree of creativity that will come back into it. And from my point of view, that's the most important lesson all supervisors should be offering to their PhD students, because I find, and it's a very hard thing to do for students and for supervisors, that less actually generates more, and we need to advocate that point.
Yeah, I think you really hit on an important point there of like actually like getting that across to people in positions that can make that difference as well. And as a PhD student, we have to recognise that there's a power dynamic there, right? And if our supervisors are forcing us to work longer hours, there's often not a lot we feel we can do. I know in the UK that there are guidelines on work hours, and you shouldn't be working past those. I mean, it's against the EU directive to work past those work hours. So there are things there, and I know that that's not the same in every country, but there are those sorts of things that are there in place to kind of protect us, although we know that most of us do work longer than perhaps we should be. One of the things that I like to do now that I lead a team of researchers is I like to have in my email, I like to just say at the bottom that you may receive an email from me out of hours, but I'm not expecting a response out of hours, and also like to schedule my emails as well, so that if I'm emailing someone, they usually arrive on a Monday rather than arriving on someone's Sunday, where we're all often like twitching on our phones, right, to check our emails and things, and sometimes we can't quite resist checking them. And I think by scheduling those emails, it actually allows me to kind of say to other people, maybe you shouldn't be checking them too. So like, I guess for a question for all of you really is like, how do you actually carve out the time for you and keep yourself mentally and physically healthy? Like, what are the activities that you do to look after yourselves? And Juanita, if I could start with you.
Yeah, well, I kind of alluded to this earlier. I've been trying to physically, I try to go to bed about 30 minutes earlier than what I normally do, because I have my Kindle now that I like to look forward to eating. And so I've been getting into like lighting candles and going. So I try to force myself to just stop what I'm doing. I'm not always successful, and on the days I'm not successful, then I start to feel guilty, and then I'm like, okay, it's okay to just flip, just like when you diet. It's okay to have a cheat day. So sometimes I do that. I've been bike riding, so I do a lot of bike riding, hanging out with my fiance, things like that.
And Linda, how about you?
Sometimes I'm bad at taking kind of me time with everything that I do. I sort of what I shouldn't really do is I sort of class my non-work work as free time, even though it's not. So I work at nonprofits, and even though that is work itself, sometimes I'm like, oh, but I'm not doing my thesis, so it's fine. So one of my main ways of taking downtime is making sure I sleep enough. And I know that's also easier said than done, but I like to make sure that I sleep at least 9 to 10 hours a night, because I find that's when my brain works. That makes my brain work best. And also just spending time with my dog and everything.
I think it's a really important point, like both of you have mentioned sleep, right? And just the link between good sleep hygiene and mental health is really, really important. And if we can prioritize that, it's one way that we can actually manage our mental health a little bit better by just getting a bit better sleep. Also completely relate about other projects being like your hobbies, and I'm really bad for this in terms of like my mental health work being my hobby, and it's work and I should do other things, and I do, but I also kind of like, I'm enjoying this because it's a bit different, and I can be very guilty of that. Bhavik, in terms of work that you do, like hobbies and things, like how do you carve out the time for yourself as a professor, and also finding time to do hobbies and other things?
Yes, a good point. I guess it's difficult to do it because you think if you do it, it will cause ripple effects across everything you do. So for me, I kind of made a conscious decision that as soon as I became a professor, I would never work on the weekend. And if I never worked on the weekend, it would set an example for everyone below me that why should you work on the weekend if I don't work on the weekend? Which is what I've stuck up to. I've started baking, I've got into art, into exercise. There's loads of things I've got into just because I'm not working on the weekend. It's brilliant. It's absolutely awesome. And I now have a filter on my email that if they email me, it just bounces them back and says, I will not respond to you because it's the weekend. And the weekend is for fun, not for emails. So I think that's important. I've kind of moved sort of meetings with students to walks outside. Let's get some fresh air. Let's have a chat. Why do we need to do it in a stuffy meeting room? Let's just refresh ourselves a bit more. So I think we've got to embrace all of these things, because again, we don't realize the impact they will have until we do them, and that's the hard part, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think having role models like yourself in positions of professorial positions is going to be really helpful to people. So yeah, I think that's really good. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next question now. And so one of the big things that came out of the CACTUS report was just really like the uncertainty about job prospects going forward. And I think that really probably is now compounded even more by the pandemic on at the moment and the economic uncertainty that we find ourselves in. The question for everyone, like, what can we really do to support early career researchers to better prepare them for the job market ahead? Because in that preparation, hopefully then that kind of uncertainty and insecurity hopefully can kind of be managed, and hopefully that will then lead to slightly better mental health for our PhD researchers. Linda, if I start with you and get your opinion on this, please.
Well, I think there's always going to be a bit of negative feelings around job searches because they are full of uncertainty. But I think making more so normalizing the fact that you can leave academia and it is okay if that's what you want to do. Because for a lot of people, they feel that they can't say to anyone, oh, I've decided I'm going to go into industry. Or some people, I've known people that have stressed about it for months before they've told their supervisor that that they're thinking of applying. And like the fact of the matter is, I'm sure a lot of people would love to stay in academia, but do you want to stay in academia in the current way it is? Because it is very difficult for a lot of people to navigate the system without driving themselves into the ground. And it's kind of, yes, we need to offer more support in multiple different ways in terms of changing attitudes and giving more training to not only early career researchers, but also all of permanent faculty to make sure that they know how they can help disrupt this current attitude and make a better academia in general.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. So like from my own experience, I'm in industry now. I did a postdoc after my PhD, and I remember someone saying to me specifically that if I was going into industry, then I'd lose all opportunity to be creative. And I think that advice came from someone who had never been in industry, and I think sometimes it's really, really important to have appropriate mentors as well, and understand and get a perspective from someone that's not you can't really get a perspective from someone about something outside of academia if they're still in academia. And my job is extraordinarily creative. I love doing what I do, and I think that if I'd listened, I might have been put off. And so I think that mentorship is really important in this respect as well. So Bhavik, obviously a lot of your work is with pedagogy, and so I'm interested in your opinion on this question.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it made me think when I looked at the report, and I think there are two aspects to this. The first one is that we have an archaic view that a PhD must equal academia. It's just rooted in everyone's brain for some reason, and it's absolutely false. We know that, which therefore means that everything we build educationally into these programs is rooted towards academia, which again is false in the way that it should be developed. It's partly driven by the way it's assessed. We have a very archaic way of assessment. We should refresh this format of assessment. Why can't we have a public communication as a format of the assessment of a PhD, which will give you new skill sets about public speaking? This is completely flawed. We need to remodel PhD programs, the skills it brings and the values it can give people in towards all routes of employability, which is what the purpose was always about a PhD. That's one really important aspect to it. The other aspect which you raise is really important. I'm an academic. I have no knowledge of what's important for industry. I can learn because I can speak to others. So for me, it's really important that if someone comes to me and says, I'm really keen to go to industry and these are the routes I want to go to, well, go and find a mentor there. Don't speak to me. I can give you very little guidance in this area. I can give you skills great for an academic, but I can't give you skills for an industrialist. Only PhD student in my group tends to be linked up with industrial partners, which is great from our point of view because we have them to support undergraduate teaching as well. So I think we need to be very, very clear that we've got this wrong and we need to change it pretty quickly. And that's something I really want to push and lobby for.
Yeah, absolutely. Juanita?
Yeah, I wanted to echo what everybody said, and I kind of want to piggyback with what Robert said earlier about how we sort of have this thought process that we're wrong about sort of how we do things. I mean, one of the things I was told when I first started PhD was that your PI is not meant to be an all-in-one remote control. So in other words, like an all-in-one remote control, you have programmed your TV, your VCR, or whatever, all your stuff programmed in. You don't want your PI to be all in one. So you want to have a mentorship or a cheerleading team of lots of different mentors. And so my PI is the person I go to for my science. I have another mentor that I go to for underrepresented issues. I have another mentor that I go to for industry issues, another mentor for academia. And it's sort of this mindset that I think we sort of need to teach students how to do this better as well, because we have the capability to do it. All of us are, we've all gotten up to or we'll get a PhD soon. And so, we sort of already know, just don't know how to reach out to other people.
I guess one of the things that for me, I didn't really know how to get a mentor, and there's a lot of professional bodies out there that have mentorship schemes. The other thing is, if you see someone in your department that you think is good and you would like to have as your mentor, ask them. The worst thing they're going to do is say no. And actually, it's quite flattering to be asked to be someone's mentor. They're probably going to be like, oh, that's really nice. And if they don't have time, they will tell you. And if they don't have time, it's going to be because they don't have time, not because they don't want to mentor you. And if they don't want to mentor you, you probably don't want them as a mentor. So all in all, I think one of the things that we can really do as PhD students, and for myself now at my career stage, is just ask and see, and that can be really powerful in and of itself. There's a lot of question as to whether or not we really give PhD students the right skills to succeed outside of academia. Linda, you're nodding there, so I feel like I'm going to come to you straight away as to I'm honing in as to your opinion on this one.
Yeah, I feel that there are, some skills that are well taught, or sometimes it depends on your university and it depends on your PhD program. Some universities are great at having short-term courses that teach students skills. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of them are optional. And I know everyone's busy and we can't attend all of them. But say, for example, in my university, we only need to take 3 short courses for the entirety of our PhD. That is, 9 days training over 4 years? That's very little. And I know it's better than nothing, but anything after that is completely optional. And that's not a lot of time to learn skills that are outside of your project. And even if teaching is something that maybe we're required to do for 1 semester, again, that's not a lot of experience and it's optional after that. I understand that in some projects you're super, super busy, and some people, depending on how their project is going, depending on how their lab work is going, they may spend all their time in their lab and they need that time. But there also needs to be time for personal development as well. There also needs to be time for everything else that's going on.
I think one of the things here is also just being asked what you want out of your PhD to start with. I think that often we don't get asked by our supervisors, what is our objective? Is it academia? Is it industry? Is it science communication? Is it consultancy work? What is our aim? Because those extra bits and responsibilities that we do, you can see here that 65% of people agreed that some of the extracurricular work that they did, they're really enjoying. And so it's how we actually pull those pieces out and enable people to actually access those and develop those so that when they get to a point where they're making a decision between academia or something else, they know exactly what that something else is and can grab it with both hands with the experience that they've got. Does anyone else want to add anything to this?
I want to piggyback off the 65% that say they enjoy their non-research responsibilities. Some of those responsibilities that PhD students do end up leading them to sort of a heightened understanding or maybe an awareness that maybe academia isn't for them. And so they begin to realize that maybe some of the values that they hold are not necessarily the same values that academia holds, for example, mentorship, leadership, things like that, that they really thrive on. Like maybe a student, for example, is in a lab and they come to an understanding that they're a really good mentor with other people, and they didn't realize that they're really good people. You know, they discovered this, and then, but unfortunately in academia, you know, the currency of academia is papers and grants. So publications and grants, that's sort of what drives academia. And mentorship is not really valued, it's not really put into the tenure package process, etc. So a lot of students sort of think about these extra, I don't really like to call it extracurricular activities, because I feel like these are the things that give us a lot of sense of purpose of who we are, but I think they're really important for a lot of PhD students. So I understand why that 65% is their action. I think that number probably is a little higher.
I know during my PhD, so like I ended up being diagnosed with clinical depression during my PhD, and it was a bad time for me and I really struggled. And one of the things that really got me through was actually doing my scientific poster design and designing scientific posters. And like I was still doing my science, but I was doing something that was allowing me to be creative in a different way. And I think that like sometimes there are certain things that actually can improve our experience by being allowed to do them, rather than just being like, all right, well, you just have to sit down and do the research now, and have nothing else accessible to you. Bhavik, would you like to add anything to this?
I'll just say, you know, everything you said is correct. And I think that the problem really is that we put so much emphasis on employability now, on everything we do in terms of study. But we seem to have forgotten PhDs. We forgot doctoral training as an important element. It's kind of like a side thought in everything we do. You know, and Linda's got it right. It's varied across institutions. It's varied across countries. There's no consistency there. You know, seldomly, I'd love to know how many students come in and they have that conversation of what would be your career aspirations with a supervisor. They don't happen all the time as well. So there are real flaws here that need to be addressed. And maybe if anything that should happen is the PhD students to start with that. My career aspirations are these. How do I get set up for this? And that will give the supervisor some thought, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. And so now we're going to just change topic ever so slightly, and we're going to move on to basically feeling valued and included in academia. So something from the CACTUS survey that came out was that was really around people feeling included by their organisation or by their peers or supervisors, irrespective of their gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation or social background. And 16% of people disagreed or strongly disagreed with this statement. So they didn't feel included or welcome in their organisation. And for me, I think this statistic, you know, maybe on first glance you could be like, well, 16% is quite a small number. To me, I'm like, 16% is way too high. Like there should be no one feeling like they don't belong in academia. I think the only way that we can solve some of the real key challenges of today is by having a diverse workforce and actually trying to tackle challenges in that way. So a question really is like, how can we better support the underrepresented within our like research labs, within our departments and things like that? So Juanita, if I start with you, please.
I have a lot to say about this, but I've just had a lot of really good experiences in academia. But unfortunately, I've had a lot of really bad experiences, a lot of racist, just really, really bad experiences that have kind of just really not made my PhD all that, you know, I've had struggles. And so I think one of the first things that that we need to sort of think about is that there's a heightened awareness now because of Black Lives Matter and because of people being sort of, you know, with COVID and people being isolated and things like that. I think we're starting to at least have the conversation. When I started my PhD, we weren't even talking about things like this, and this was like 4 years ago. And so I really feel like right now we have an opportunity to be able to at least start thinking about these things and try to ask people like about why they don't feel included. One of the things also that I think people really need to sort of think about is that in academia, a lot of times we feel like that we don't always have people don't want to say anything because they don't want to offend anybody else. So they'd rather not say anything at all. But sometimes silence is actually worse than the actual word itself. And so I feel like starting to just have conversations with people. Most of my friends, I have a very diverse set of friends. I have white friends, I have Black friends, I have Latino friends, etc. But when I ask my white friends how many friends do they have that are of other, you know, backgrounds, they start counting on their hands. I'm like, well, I have 2, I have 3, and I'm like, why is it okay for me to sort of have a diverse set of friends and then you don't? And so I think just starting to have these conversations is really, really important. I think also it's also important to include the PIs as well, because the leadership comes from the top down. And so if a PI does not speak out when something is happening in the lab or something is happening within faculty meetings, then that sort of, you know, gets perpetuated and nobody is in check. So I think those are just a couple of things that, you know, like I said, I could go on and on about this, but those are a few of my thoughts.
I think there's some really important points there, and I think that also just having reporting routes as well. If someone isn't doing their job properly, and you see something happening that needs to be reported, there need to be in place, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that shortly. Bhavik, would you like to expand on this question a little bit for me?
Yeah, sure. I think Juanita raises some great points, and to sort of elaborate on this, I think first and foremost, to prevent this, we need to embrace diversity. And to embrace diversity, we need to understand and value culture and ethnicity and the values it brings to us. We can't do this unless we talk, unless we understand what our unconscious bias is, and as a society develop. And that doesn't happen by sitting in a corridor not knowing anything. It happens because you communicate with people. So for me, you know, I don't know about as many different protective groups as I could do. And the only way I've learned as a PI is to speak to people, to learn about their struggles, to understand their challenges, to think what I can do by those personal experiences to improve as a supervisor, to be inclusive. But that's not the only place we should be, not just for myself as a PI, but for everyone in this journey, is to speak out. Until we do not speak out and call out microaggressions, every attitude that is wrong, that we believe is wrong in our minds and souls, we're not going to shape this. We're not going to even break it. And we all have to do it. There's not just, you know, it's down to the people that are from the ethnic minorities. It's down to these people. Everyone has to participate. So we can make this difference. This is one, but I truly believe we can make this difference, but we all have to be together in it. And that's the way I think we shape this.
I think one of the things for me I've found is like also just like not being afraid to be called out, and to rethink my thought processes and like make sure that I'm constantly being questioned and thinking about these questions as well. And like, you know, there's certain things like, for example, I saw a fantastic talk the other day, which was talking about the use of pronouns for people, and just like, you know, what do you do if you use the wrong pronoun? Well, you go about and you correct for it, and you figure out and you do it better next time. Like sometimes we make these mistakes, but sometimes like we have the opportunity to correct for that, and often it's in our actions afterwards as well that really makes the difference. A lot of these things shouldn't happen in the first place, but if we do make mistakes, it's okay, and we need to correct for them and make that change. Linda, how about you with this question?
Yeah, so I guess I'm also noticing that there is a lot more talking around diversity in academia, But one thing I'm noticing is that, and it's also missing from this question, is that the minority group of disability is usually not included anywhere. Everybody forgets about it. And while we still need to be having these conversations, we also need to be ensuring that we include all minorities, because especially when we're talking about ethnicity, disabled Black people are one of the biggest are discriminated against the most. They're discriminated against by all sides, and it can be really hard for them. But when we talk about like supporting the underrepresented, a lot of people, something I've noticed, and this is disability anyway, but maybe it extends to other minorities as well, is that a lot of people feel uncomfortable about approaching a subject because they don't have the language. When I've actually sat down and talked to people and be like, use the word disabled or disability and not differently abled, they've been much more open about talking. And I know it's not a fix-all situation, but it does help for some people. But also just the fact that if you get it wrong, just say, oh, I didn't know that, sorry, and, you know, use what you're being told to use. Don't say, oh, well, I read it on a website that, you know, disabled people like to be called differently abled. And it's like, no, I'm telling you we don't. As a disabled person, I'm telling you that's wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely understand that, and I guess kind of hitting on this is making sure that our institutions are actually hosting some of these events to actually enable some of these conversations as well. And like often I'd like it to be top down, but sometimes it has to be bottom up as well. So I think as a PhD student, remembering that if there is, you want to make a difference in this area, sometimes it's just about calling that webinar and just doing it, right? And I think we sometimes can be afraid to do that, but you know, you have the power to do that and set something up in your department. So if you want to make some change, I would say go and do it. Again, the worst thing that someone is going to say is no. Okay. So there was a huge amount of people reporting discrimination, harassment or bullying at work during the CACTUS report, and 66% of those surveyed were really unsure about the policies that their institutions had against discrimination, harassment or bullying at the workplace. And I think this is not something that we can fix as PhD students. I think this is something that institutionally needs to change. And I think, again, we can make a lot of noise about this, but I think it's something that this is a serious finding that we really have to take seriously. And we know discrimination, harassment and bullying at work is happening. We have to do more to fix this. Out of interest for the audience, like, do you know where to find your departmental bullying and harassment policies? I'm really curious to know if you do. So we're going to run that poll now. I'll be on the right hand side. And whilst that poll's going on, what can we do if a PhD student doesn't feel welcome in their research group? And I'm going to ask each one of you like one of these questions, I think, because of time, really. We've got so much to talk about. Bhavik, what can we do for PhD students if they don't feel welcome in their research group?
I tend to, I mean, it's a good question. And what I tend to do is sort of make sure they're integrated with a more wider group of students, maybe from their culture or their background, that gives them a bit of belonging, I think is the key here. So from my point of view, is to work out really where the uncomfortable nature of that interaction occurs. Is it because they're missing something or something's out there? We tend to tap into some of the resources we've got from the undergraduates. So we've got resources now that I can hand out to PhD students about where to find different restaurants or food outlets or this that relate to different cultures and backgrounds that are there, different support mechanisms that we provide, types of issues that are there. So I think for us it's really important that we can spot it. I think as a supervisor it's really important to spot when someone looks unhealthy and unhappy, and then to really have that conversation to say what's really causing those issues, and then looking for all the support mechanisms that are there. And if you don't know them, then and speak to guidance tutors or anything of that nature where you can get that knowledge to provide support for a PhD student. After all, that they're under your care as a supervisor, and you have to look after their well-being.
I also think this is why I like forums like Twitter, for example, because if you're a minority group and you can't find someone to connect with, maybe you'll find someone across the world that you can. So I think I find that really useful as well. In terms of changes to make the research culture more inclusive, Juanita, could you maybe give us a thought on the second question there?
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot that can be done. One of the things that I feel like that we sort of lack as far as being inclusive in research is that if a student comes to you as a PI or somebody, and if they say, this XYZ is happening to me, I don't feel welcome, etc. And if you dismiss it, and if you just say, oh, they're just teasing, oh, they didn't mean anything by that, etc., etc., that minimizes sort of the feelings that a lot of students have. And so then you quickly learn as a PhD student, you're not welcome, your ideas are not welcome, and so you need to just keep your head down and just get your science done and then get out. And so, and I really feel like that sort of mindset needs to change. If someone comes to you that says that they are not feeling welcome, you need to validate their feelings. You need to accept that what they're feeling is real and it's valid, and do something about it. Especially because PhD students, they're the lowest on the totem pole as far as the hierarchy of academia. And so, and they're not going to do anything sort of rock the boat because they want that PhD. And so they're going to do everything they can to just make sure they just sort of sail smoothly, but take on those microaggressions, unfortunately, and then of course it affects their mental health and then the cycle just continues. And so I really feel like this validation of people's feelings and what, not only their feelings, but also their experiences needs to come first and foremost.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And then I'm going to leave the question now to improve what we can do to improve the culture of academia, because I'm hoping that we'll kind of address that in our final kind of concluding statements, if you will. So I guess the next thing we'd like to just to poll is really if you would feel comfortable disclosing a mental health concern to your supervisor. I was really lucky that I could during my PhD. I think if I'd not had that support, I think I would have really struggled, and we're very interested to know if you feel you could talk about that with your PhD supervisor. So again, on the right hand side, there will shortly be a poll there just for you to give the answer to that question for us. I think 65% of the audience have said that they don't know where to find their departmental bullying or harassment policies. So I think that is a shocking number, isn't it? So in terms of seeking support and asking for help, 49% of researchers said during the CACTUS report that they would not talk about feelings of severe stress or anxiety with the relevant people or authorities in their workplace. And 63% of people experiencing stress or anxiety said they'd not sought professional help. So as a general question to all of you, what can we do to make it easier for people to disclose this sort of information about mental health, and more importantly, feel safe to do so as well, I think. So, Bhavik, I think if I could start with you.
Yeah, it's a really difficult question, I think in the context, because I think it is about, it's a two-way sword. It's about making sure that supervisors are able to have the ability to do that work. I mean, from a PI's perspective, we're not trained to be mental health advocates. I've never had any training as a supervisor to support people's well-being. And therefore, the first issue is that if someone does come and seek support, I wouldn't know what to do or how to counsel or support them in any shape or form because we're not given that training. So what's really important is that there is a process that does exist for students to go. And I think it probably doesn't work in a way that it has to be the supervisor. It can be the supervisor, it can be an independent body. In an undergraduate course, it would be a student guidance support tutor or something. And we need that sort of level of provision, mental health provision, for postgraduate.
Yeah, absolutely. I think training for PIs is one of those things that we absolutely need to do. And I think it's not surprisingly, even though we know that mental health is an issue for PhD students and academics, like it's still something that isn't at the forefront of the training, and I find that fascinating. And it's such a simple thing to do, and yet we're so far away from doing it. And I think closing that gap is going to be really important. Linda, would you like to expand on the question a little bit?
Yeah. Well, one, like Bhavik said, is that no one is trained on what they are supposed to do. I know a lot of universities, they don't even train about how to be a mentor, never mind how to mentor someone with mental health difficulties. So there are two things that need to be addressed. But just in general, for me, I do disclose my disabilities and my mental health. That's just a thing I do. I don't care what the response is. I did before, I've gone past it. So for me, what would make it more comfortable is having someone who is receptive and not just going, oh, you shouldn't tell people that, because that's not a good response. That's not what you're supposed to be doing. One thing that needs to be done is massive tackling of stigma, because this perception, even of people that know the psychology and the neuroscience behind mental health, still hold stigma of it's because they're weak, it's because they can't do this. And that is something that everyone needs to, throw out and not forget to put back in,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, in part why we're all here today, right? To start doing this and talking about this, because we all have mental health. Like, why on earth aren't we talking about it? Like, Juanita, would you like to add something to this?
Two issues here with academia. Academia has a problem with racism, and it has a problem with mental health. And those are the two things that academics can do everything else, but they can't do racism and they can't do mental health. And so what do they do to steer away from it is they just don't even talk about it, right? And so the way that I've sort of had these conversations with my department, because guys in my department have come to me too, and they're like, how do I know to talk to I'm not a mental health expert, I'm not a psychologist, or, I'm a white guy from wherever, from, USA, and I don't know anything about what it's like to be Mexican. And you don't have to, right? And so I always tell people in academia, treat sort of mental health and racism just like you would treat like doing a scientific experiment. Somebody gives you a protocol and you have a recipe, and there's all these little tricks in the protocol, like maybe you have to flip the Eppendorf tube twice and then maybe turn up like that. I don't know. Whatever the little tricks are to it that don't come in a protocol. You do a scientific protocol, you screw up, you make a mistake, you try it again. You need to keep this the same exact way, right? So talking about mental health, you're going to make mistakes as a PI, you're going to make mistakes as supervisors, but learn from those mistakes. So I think number one is, in order for us to sort of get over these hurdles with mental health, is equip supervisors with the resources that they need. If a student comes to you and says, oh, something, I have a mental health issue, some PIs are very like, oh, well, I'll just send you to the student health center. And they just pass it off. They just pass off the student. And that, I think, is a really not the right mindset, because then the student just feels like they're just being, shifted from one area to another. And the same thing with racism. People are like, oh, I don't want to talk about this because I don't know anything about this. Well, have to come from that experience. You just like Bhavik was saying earlier, we need to actually just talk to each other. And I just feel like in academia, we're not doing that. And same thing, like I said, with mental health. So I think number one, we need to sort of kind of get over this hurdle that we're going to make mistakes, because we're just going to have to accept we're all going to make mistakes. And number two, I think we need to address this by destigmatizing it, by normalizing it. Talking about mental health, like if you're going to go to the doctor. If you're going to go to the doctor, you have to leave lab early. Hey, I'm leaving a lab early because I have to go to the dentist. Hey, I have to leave lab early because I'm going to go see my therapist. Just normalize it. Talk about it as if it was something normal, and then it becomes, sort of part of everyday conversation.
Absolutely. And I guess as a final poll, we've got have you ever thought about seeing a therapist? And I think we're not going to spend a long time talking about this, but I think getting professional help is really, really important. And like, if we can encourage you to do anything today, if you are struggling with your mental health, seeking medical help is really, really important. And also speaking to those around you to have that conversation as well. So if you're struggling to find support, like, we're all on Twitter, we can probably point you in the direction of some help. And also your university will have some mental health support there as well. And I please do encourage you to use it. Okay. And so I'm just going to move on to the next slide. I guess we've kind of talked about this question a little bit about what's the biggest challenge facing academia today, in your opinion, around mental health. For me, it's the stigma. I think that we still need to have people in positions of responsibility and power in academia talking about mental health, as well as those of us that don't have that power. And if I could just ask you maybe to say a brief 20 seconds or so about how you think we could maybe, I don't quite know what's going on with the slides, how you could perhaps, what the biggest challenge is in maybe 20 seconds each. So starting with Linda, please.
Yeah, so I feel that one of the biggest challenges is we still regard academics as machines and not people, and that we expect them to be at 100% and have no feelings and no biases and nothing, and we don't want to talk about anything that doesn't fit with that view.
Absolutely. Okay, moving on to Bhavik.
I guess 2 words for me: competition, metrics, therefore a bad culture. Need to change it.
And Juanita.
Lack of normalization. We need to talk about it as if it was just common everyday language.
Absolutely. Okay. And then I think this is like our final question for today, and I think something that I would like to address. If you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice before starting your PhD, what would it be? Starting with Juanita, so we'll do it in reverse order this time.
I would say probably not be so hard on myself. Take better care of myself. Yeah.
Bhavik?
Gosh, this is a long time ago. So I guess the question I'll ask myself, mini Bhavik, would be, believe that you belong.
That's such a lovely statement. That's really important. And Linda?
Probably don't get into the habit of working weekends.
It's a very good one. And I think mine would be that self-care is a right and it's not earned. And that we need to look after ourselves, and if we look after ourselves, then we can do brilliant research, and if we don't look after ourselves, we're not going to be able to do brilliant research. And I think for me, making sure that we're spending that time and looking after ourselves is really, really important. And then I guess that brings us to the end of today and our conversation here. The slides are still bouncing around a little bit. But yeah, so I just want to say thank you to the panelists for being here. Like, it's been really fun to have this conversation. I am going to now turn to Twitter and maybe try and answer some of the questions in the chat. If you have any questions, we'll try and address some of those. And if any of the other panelists have time to answer on Twitter, we'll also try and do that. But yeah, thank you for joining us and really being part of this conversation as well. We really, really appreciate it. All right, thank you. Bye all.
I don't know if you guys can hear me. Yeah, thank you so much, each one of you, for joining today and for making this such an insightful and lovely conversation. We're really lucky and privileged to have you here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. All right. Have a nice day, everyone, the rest of your day. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Zero.